are those of the program's participants and do not necessarily reflect those of station staff, management, and advertisers.
Las Vegas Commercial Real Estate Radio, the brand new radio show about commercial real estate, buying, selling, and leasing. Las Vegas Commercial Real Estate Radio, hosted by Carlos Moreno, a.k.a. Seymour, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday at 10:30 a.m. Don't miss the best commercial real estate buying, selling, and leasing show in the Valley. Las Vegas Commercial Real Estate Radio, right here on AM 1400 and 107.1 FM KSHP.
What's up, Las Vegas? This is your boy Spank E. Y'all know me. We got the #1 morning show in Las Vegas called the Jokes and Jams Morning Squad. We up early with the ignorance, starting at 7 a.m. And we got the best morning squad in the business. The lovely Mahogany, Purdy Rose, Hype Panda, and comedian Wildcat, and me, Spank E, the prodigal son. Mondays and Tuesdays starting at 7 a.m. The Jokes and Jams Morning Squad with Spank E, the Al Capone of the microphone. Mondays and Tuesdays, 7 a.m. Let's get it.
Since 1949, Norm's restaurants have served up classic comfort food and unbeatable value across Southern California. And they're now open in Las Vegas at 4605 West Charleston at Decatur. Enjoy favorites like the Bigger, Better Breakfast, T-Bone Steak Trio, and more. Norm's is finally open in Vegas at 4605 West Charleston at Decatur. Visit norms.com for more information.
The views and opinions expressed in the following program are those of the program's participants and do not necessarily reflect those of station staff, management, and advertisers.
All right, what's going on, everybody? Welcome. It is Pushing the Limits. Thank you so much for joining us on a Thursday. Yes. A lot of breaking news to discuss, a lot of stuff to talk about. You could be watching on the Occupy Democrats Network, of course, the Washington Press Network, the FMAM dial KSHP, my personal YouTube page, which is at PTL Radio Show, TikTok, Twitch, you name it, we're on it, Blue Sky, X, we're everywhere, and we appreciate you being a part of our program. We are going to get wall-to-wall coverage on the breaking news that just occurred earlier today. Matt Gaetz has officially withdrawn from the AG position. We're also going to get some more information and some in-depth reporting here on Pete Hegseth and a police report from years back, which is pretty damning. Even though he was never charged or convicted of a crime, he paid off a woman who claims that she was basically raped by Pete Hegseth. So we'll talk about that. We'll get into the details of that police report coming up here in just a few minutes as well. And coming up at the bottom of the hour, we're going to be joined by Senior Counsel of Article 3 Project and the IAP, Will Chamberlain, will be joining us on the show as well. So certainly looking forward to Will joining us a little bit later on in the program. And as I said, a lot of breaking news to talk about. And the second hour, of course, we'll be taking your phone calls, and it'll be dedicated to all of you. But without further ado, joining us right now on the show, my friend, former presidential candidate, former Chicago congressman, always great to get his takes. I love him. Joe Walsh joining us right now on the program. Joe, good to have you back on, my friend. How are you?
Always good to be with you, Brian.
Thanks, Joe. First reaction when you heard the news not that long ago that Matt Gaetz was withdrawing his name and for the Attorney General position. What are your thoughts?
Somewhat surprised, because I've always been the school of thought here that Trump wanted Gaetz to be AG. Like he's not playing 7D chess with any of these picks. He wants these horribly unqualified people to run these agencies because he wants to get revenge back at these agencies. So he wanted Gaetz. It sounds like there was another 17-year-old girl coming out, so he probably had no choice.
Do you feel like this report is eventually going to come out anyway, or do you think this actually might help Matt Gaetz and they might Republicans will continue to protect him, at least many of them? How do you see this thing playing out?
I don't see how the details of the report don't come out. They're going to come out. Republicans will try to protect him. Gaetz is going to run for governor of Florida or do something. By the way, Brian, he could go back to the House in January if he wanted. Right. I don't think he does. But yeah, the details of that report will get out.
I've heard rumors that he might be eyeing Marco Rubio's seat. Do you see that as being a strong possibility?
It possibly, but I hear that Trump's daughter-in-law, Laura Trump,
right,
has the inside track on that one. It's been talked about for a year or so that Gaetz did want to run for governor of Florida because, DeSantis is term limited down there in 26.
Joe, I think, this speaks volumes on Donald Trump's judgment or lack thereof, but I want to specifically talk about the Republican Party, a party that you've been such a big part of your whole life. What does it say about so many of these people who clearly know who Matt Gaetz is, but yet in the last week or so, they were defending him. They were curling up into a pretzel, almost afraid of Donald Trump. That's probably the reason. What does it say about these Republicans who know who Matt Gaetz is? They actually saw some of these naked pictures of women that he was showing even on the House floor, yet they still respected Trump's decision, at least they said they did, in choosing him.
Well, what it says about my former Republican colleagues in Congress is they'll do whatever Trump tells them to do. But more importantly, what it says about Republican voters, the election 2.5 weeks ago made crystal clear that character no longer matters. The character of a candidate no longer matters. There's talk now that, what's his name, the Fox News guy, Pete Hegseth, a serial philanderer, who sounds like he tried to rape a woman.
Yes.
And people are saying, well, that guy shouldn't be Secretary of Defense. Excuse me, America just elected again a commander-in-chief who was found liable of rape, who was a serial philanderer. 27 other women have accused Trump of sexual harassment and assault, and he's the commander-in-chief. So Hegseth, Gaetz, all of these people, they're just like Trump. Character doesn't matter anymore to Republican voters.
Could not agree with you more. With that being said, who do you think Donald Trump will choose to be his next attorney general? Because I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. Who do you think?
Don't be surprised if the number 2 guy that he picked to be the number 2 guy at Justice becomes, I'm forgetting the guy's name now, but this should have been, like in any other time, Bri, this would be the biggest scandal. Trump last week picked for the number 2 and number 3 people at the Justice Department his own personal criminal defense attorneys. And the guy he picked for number 2, don't be surprised if he gets bumped up to become attorney general. But his own, because that's what we know, Brian, Donald Trump wants the attorney general to be his personal lawyer. Mm-hmm. That goes against everything that the Justice Department is supposed to be.
Joe, I guess this would be my last question for you, and that is, we're already learning that Elon Musk has already got into verbal spats with some of Donald Trump's people. My question to you is, how long do you think this will take as soon as Donald Trump takes over office, that this will all implode, that the implosion will start to begin? How long do you think it will take for people to turn on him and for things to really get out of hand?
Well, I think things will get out of hand with Elon and Trump and with everybody right out of the gate. Trump was incompetent when he got elected in 2016. He knows more now, but he hires bad people. And he's a bad person. So it's always chaotic. There's always infighting. There's always backstabbing. Elon's the wealthiest man on the planet. Elon also has, I think, 27 different aspects of his businesses are being looked at right now in our judicial system. So Elon also has a reason to stay kind of close to Trump, to sort of have Trump protect him.
Yeah.
So that his own self-interest may keep him there a while longer.
I tend to agree with you there. Joe, I love you, buddy. Have a phenomenal weekend, you and your family, and we'll talk soon. Always appreciate the time, my friend. Thank you so much.
Right back at you, Brian. Thanks, man.
Thank you. Joe Walsh, everybody. I wanted to get his take to start the show. Now I'm going to give you mine. I'm going to start with Pete Hegseth. And some of this stuff is very difficult to talk about. Pete Hegseth, as you know, has been chosen by Donald Trump to be his Secretary of Defense. I told you about the adultery. I told you about the way he's treated women his whole life. I discussed that on this show right out of the gate. This stuff is very difficult to talk about, but I received details of what is in that police report where a woman in California claims that Pete Hegseth, in a police report, physically blocked her from leaving a hotel room, took her phone, and then sexually assaulted her, even though she remembered saying no a lot. And this police report was obtained by CNN. It's a 22-page report. It includes conflicting accounts of how intoxicated Hegseth and the woman were, and descriptions of video surveillance showing some of their movements that night. Now, the women who accused Hegseth of assault broke into tears when asked about the matter by CNN reporters last week. Now, unless she's some sort of phenomenal actress, which I do not believe she is, I believe something really terrible happened in that room that night. What does she say happened? Well, she told police that her memory after the argument, they had some sort of big verbal argument in that hotel room. She told officers that Hegseth took her phone from her hands. Then she said she tried to leave the room and he held her against her will, blocking the door with his body. She said she remembered saying no quite often. Next, she said she remembered Hegseth over her on a bed or couch, lying on top of her with his dog tags hovering over her face. She later went to the hospital and told the nurse that she could not remember whether or not a penetration occurred, but believed that she was sexually assaulted at that time. She told police that she remembered Hegseth, for lack of a better term, I'm trying not to be too graphic, finishing onto her stomach before throwing a towel at her and asking if she was okay. She told police she didn't even remember how she got back to her hotel room, but remembered walking into her room, getting into bed, and the alleged victim's husband said to police that he was worried when she didn't get back to the hotel room earlier that night and that she didn't return until about 4 o'clock in the morning. Pete Hegseth was asked about this earlier today in the House chambers after having a meeting with the incoming Vice President J.D. Vance, and here's what he had to say.
Fishing sexually assaulted in Monterey, California. I have, as far as the media is concerned, I'll keep it very simple. The matter was fully investigated, and I was completely cleared, and that's probably it. Thanks very much.
So the audio, not easy to hear. He said, I was fully investigated and I was cleared. Yeah, from a criminal standpoint, he is correct. But I'm going to ask all of you this question and think for a moment, and I want you to forget if you're a Republican or a Democrat, if that's possible. I know for some people that's very difficult these days, but I want you to forget your biases. Forget the fact that you might be a Trump supporter or you're not a Trump supporter. Please put that aside for a moment, and I want to ask all of you a very serious question. Let's just say, hypothetically speaking, you're a prominent member of the media or you have a prominent job as the CEO of a Fortune 500 company, whatever the case may be, you might have a very public job. And let's just hypothetically say a woman is claiming that you sexually assaulted and or raped her. Let's just say for a moment it's not true. And let me be very clear. I think this alleged victim is telling the truth. But for hypothetical purposes, let's just say a woman's trying to ruin your life. She's trying to put your name out there, lying about you, saying that you perhaps sexually assaulted her. There's a police report and all that. I would imagine your first reaction would be would be a lot of anger, right? Would your next reaction be to pay her off? Just think about that for a second. I can only speak for myself, and I'd say if someone made up a story like that about me, by the way, I don't think this story's made up, but hypothetically speaking, if somebody made up a story like that about me, I would immediately hire an attorney and I would immediately sue that person for defamation, because I think one of the worst things you can do besides sexual assault is lying about it. But that's not what Pete Hegseth did. See, this happened years ago. There was no defamation lawsuit. There was no civil action against this woman. What did Pete Hegseth do? Well, according to Hegseth's own attorney, who acknowledged it, he paid her off. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. He paid her off. Says he's completely innocent. He didn't do anything wrong. but he paid her an undisclosed amount of money. And I would imagine that was probably a large sum of money since he makes a lot of money. Is that the actions and the behavior of someone that is completely innocent? The police report is out there. For whatever reason, the police decided not to file charges. I'm going to tell you something, ladies and gentlemen. When they try to tell you who they are, believe them. A man who cheated on his first wife with a coworker. A man, and I use that term loosely, and right now I don't care about whether he served this country or not, because we are talking about infidelity and we are talking about sexual assault. So the amount of time that somebody served this country has no bearing on this story. He cheated on his first wife with somebody he worked with. He cheated on his second wife with a Fox News executive and had a baby with her while still married to another woman. That ex-wife, eventually the ex-wife, filed a lawsuit against him. This is a really bad guy. Pete Hegseth is a bad guy. And I don't care whether he served this country or not in this conversation. I always respect anybody who serves, but what does it matter at this point when you have the history that this man has, the way he's treated women his entire life, and still saying that he doesn't think that women should serve on the battlefield? Let me tell you something. I believe this victim. I believe her. Is she just a phenomenal actress that'll just cry on command? Well, when the CNN reporters caught up with her a week ago and asked her, she's not allowed to talk about it. She signed a non-disclosure. She started crying. I'll tell you what I think happened. Everything that this woman said. Because I believe her. I believe this woman. I believe that Pete Hegseth held this woman in that hotel room against her will. I believe what she said. I believe there was a sexual assault that took place. And I believe the reason why he paid her off was not because, well, I'm in fear that she's going to ruin my reputation, because an assault happened in that room and you didn't want it to go public. You didn't want her to go public, so you paid her off. The same reason why Donald Trump paid off his ex-wife who claimed that he raped her. The same reason why Donald Trump paid off all those discrimination lawsuits. They pay people off. They use their money and their power to pay people off so stories can go away. We could be talking about Harvey Weinstein, for example. We could be talking about Bill Cosby. Why is it? We could be talking about Matt Gaetz. Why is it that all these men in powerful positions just pay women so the story can kind of go away? Stormy Daniels being another perfect example of what I'm talking about, even though that wasn't a sexual assault. It was just having unprotected sex with a porn star 2 weeks after Barron was born. But for all you right-wing evangelical Christians out there, this is what you got. You obviously don't care. This is who Pete Hegseth is. You want him to be the Secretary of Defense? Are you effing kidding me? This guy's despicable, and he's a disgrace. Speaking of disgrace, Matt Gaetz withdrew his name from the Attorney General's position. And he put out a statement earlier today. And in that statement, he said, "There is no time to waste on a needlessly protracted Washington scuffle. Thus, I'll be withdrawing my name from consideration to serve as Attorney General. Trump's DOJ must be in place and ready on day one." This has nothing to do with the scuffle. This has nothing to do with Matt Gaetz being a distraction. It has everything to do with Matt Gaetz worried that this report is going to come out that is very damning, that now, my understanding shows that there were at least 2 instances, according to witnesses, where Matt Gaetz had sex with an underage 17-year-old girl. And it is interesting to me that some of these MAGA Republicans seem to be the first kinds of people that will call liberals or Democrats pedophiles. You hear this stuff all the time. Attacks all the time. I've even been in situations where I was interviewing Donald Trump supporters and they would scream really weird things at me. They'd call me a pedophile. They'd say I got the 5th booster. These are very stupid people, obviously. But the same kinds of people that want to call others pedophiles are the same people that are defending a pedophile themselves in Matt Gaetz. Either, it is interesting, right? The Democrats want the report out. Most of the Republicans do not want this report out. The report's going to get out eventually. I promise you that. I was right about Matt Gaetz, that he would never be affirmed to be the attorney general. And I'm telling you, I'm right about this. The report is eventually going to come out. It's going to come out. Whether Matt Gaetz likes it or not, whether some of these disgusting, deplorable MAGA Republicans like it or not, it's going to come out. I want you to listen to a CNN interview that the attorney who was representing the women who claim that Matt Gaetz slept with her, or the woman, I should say, while she was a minor. The evidence is absolutely overwhelming. And the pictures and the Venmo, PayPal payments, and over a dozen witnesses. Have a listen to this attorney representing this woman.
When does all this happen? The sex is happening before the Fox News interview, before the show, before the...
The payments would take place before or after the event. So in this instance, I believe the testimony was that they received payments in part for flights before, and sometimes there'd be payments on the back end as well. But it's not something where we're talking about leaving money on the table or anything like that. Mm-hmm. All the transactions, generally speaking, were electronic. There's evidence of one check that was provided to my client, but generally speaking, it was electronic, and those payments would come either before or after. That's what the testimony was before the House.
All right. So how much evidence do your clients have? I mean, obviously all these payments are there, but as the House Ethics Committee would have, that the Senate may get to see, are there also pictures of all of these times together in these parties? I would assume there's a lot of video and photographic evidence.
Well, despite the fact that my clients weren't allowed to take pictures, there was a strict no phone policy. There are numerous photos that they were able to provide. So they provided photos to the House at the New York event. They provided selfies that Representative Gaetz sent them. They testified that they sent Representative Gaetz nudes from time to time at his request, and also on their own accord. Yeah. There are also numerous text messages, group messages between them as well. But you have to understand that my clients are only 2 out of the over a dozen witnesses that testified. I was present for 2 of those. And so what I'm telling you is just a fraction of the evidence that's available of the thousands of documents, and the 25 subpoenas, 12 witnesses.
So and I guess that's a crucial part of this. The House Ethics Committee is scheduled to make its decision on releasing their full report. Do you think the allegations you're talking about here and detailing, which have to do with your 2 clients, are a large chunk of their report, or do you think that this is the tip of the iceberg?
Well, I do think that's probably the tip of the iceberg. My clients did play a central role, but the evidence that the House has, I would presume, is overwhelming because my clients were just 2 of the other witnesses, and there are very important witnesses who have yet to come out and give a preview of what the House Ethics Committee results might show.
The attorney just said this is the tip of the iceberg, and they want to say a 2-tier justice system. Thousands of documents, this attorney says, and I believe him. Thousands. Venmo payments, crystal clear as day. Upwards of $10,000. Matt Gaetz paying underage women for sex. And as the attorney just said, this is just the tip of the iceberg. But this is the definition, in my personal opinion, of white privilege. And when African Americans in this country and minorities across the land in the United States of America talk about white privilege, Matt Gaetz is exactly who they are talking about. This is a guy who was pulled over for multiple DUIs when he was younger. His father was a prominent politician, got him a slap on the wrist, and got out of most of all of those cases. And now here is another example. Matt Gaetz paying women for underage sex. Yes, I believe it to be true. I'm not going to say allegedly anymore because this report is going to come out where we will know that Matt Gaetz did have sex with underage women. The testimony, just a few women, and he said it's the tip of the iceberg. There's probably, I think, as he said, over a dozen more witnesses that have yet to testify. There's a paper trail. There's Venmo payments. But Matt Gaetz wasn't charged with a crime. Why is that? What does Matt Gaetz and Pete Hegseth, these kinds of people, have in common with Donald Trump? Well, I would say a lot. They're all white, for starters. I would say they have a lot in common with Donald Trump, starting with sexual assault, allegations of rape, sexual abuse. These are not men. These are cowards. Okay? Men don't sexually abuse women. Real men, good men, men who respect women. And these are the same kinds of people that will attack Tim Walz or Tim Walz's son for getting emotional. They'll attack Kamala Harris' family for getting emotional, and somehow they're not real men for crying. But somehow the people who are saying you're not a real man if you cry are the same men that are accused of sexual assault or rape or liable sexual abusers. This is what you're going to get in the Trump campaign. And whether Pete Hegseth is confirmed to be the confirmed to be the Secretary of Defense or not, I'm sure he'll be replaced, and Matt Gaetz will be replaced with some more right-wing clowns that have no business being in that position. But for all you blacks for Trump out there, he hasn't hired one black guy in his administration yet. So I wanted to be clear on that as well. So here's what we're going to do. We are going to take a quick break. And when we come back, to get his thoughts on this story, Matt Gaetz, and much, much more. His name is Will Chamberlain. He's got a very large following on social media. He's the senior counsel at the Article 3 Project and the IAP. So I certainly want to get his thoughts on this. He is a very opinionated guy, but he does lean towards the Trump team. So I want to get his thoughts on this. Will Chamberlain is going to be joining us next. And then, of course, in hour number 2, we will take your phone calls on this and get your thoughts on this. Of course, the breaking news, Matt Gaetz taking his name out of the hat for the Attorney General position. I personally believe Pete Hegseth is next. We'll take a quick break. Will Chamberlain is going to be joining us next. It's Pushing the Limits right here on KSHP.
Hey, everybody. Are you struggling to find a pizza place that reminds you of Brooklyn? That true blue New York style pie? Well, worry no more. Stallone's Italian Eatery Pizza is a knockout. We're located at 467 East Silverado Ranch Boulevard, just off of Greenview Road, half a mile east of South Point Casino, just minutes from the Las Vegas Strip. Come by and grab a slice of pie. Plus, check out our Brooklyn-inspired Italian cuisine. Our sandwiches are super. Hero, that is. Because why be a sub when you can be a hero? Stallone's Italian Eatery is here to serve you phenomenal food, Vegas. Forget about it.
Who would have thought there'd be so many kids playing ice hockey in the desert? Jake Helb's Hockey Foundation and the Las Vegas Ice Warriors, founded by Gina Yusufzai 8 years ago, made it possible for families who can't afford the equipment and fees. Donate today at www.hockeyforkids.org and help us continue making a difference. Join us in supporting Jake Helb's Hockey Foundation and the Las Vegas Ice Warriors, where every kid gets a shot at the starting line. Just a reminder, our website is www.hockeyforkids.org.
Have you ever dreamed of having your own radio show or a podcast, but just didn't think it was possible? Well, dreams can come true. Radio U. Radio U is a 5-day course that'll teach you how to acquire your dream show. We'll teach you how to host, how to write commercial, how to interview, how to market, how to write a contract, and most importantly, how to monetize your dream radio show. You'll learn from some of the best in the business with over 75 years in broadcast experience. You'll learn from people like me. And the best part? Every single student will be live on the radio as part of the class. Plus, one student from each class will get their very own radio show. You'll be live on the air right here in Las Vegas. Radio U. The 5-day course is being offered at $699. For more information, give Radio U a call. 702-763-5024. That's 702-763-5024. Or check them out at radioyou101.com.
All right, welcome back. Pushing the Limits on a Thursday. Thank you so much for joining us. A very busy news day. Of course, following the breaking news, Matt Gaetz withdrawing his name from the Attorney General position. Not really a shocker, not a surprise to me. I'm a little surprised that it happened this soon, but this report coming out, my estimation from the people that I've talked to, very damning. We'll see if it ever gets out to the public. But without further ado, I wanted to introduce this gentleman to the show. Of course, you know him as the senior counsel at the Article 3 Project and, of course, the IAP. It is a pleasure to have Will Chamberlain joining us right now on the show. Will, thank you so much for joining us, my friend. How are you?
Doing great. Thanks for having me in the middle of a move. So, dealing with logistics.
No problem. I I appreciate you taking the time to join us. So I wanted to get your first take on this. Are you surprised that Matt Gaetz withdrew this early? What are your thoughts?
I'm actually kind of not surprised. I am not surprised at the composition. There were just four senators who were just going to say no matter what. I think that, we have to remember that we didn't win as big a Senate majority as maybe we could have. I mean, we came very close in 3 other states, and if we had 56, it'd be a lot different than it is with 53. I mean, honestly, it's, you could count on every single Democrat senator to vote no on somebody on Gaetz, and then you just lose 4 and that's it. And, he can do all he wants, but at the end of the day, if you've got kind of a Romney clone in Utah with this new guy, Curtis, you got McConnell, who just can't stand him. And then you've got Collins and Murkowski. It's just, what are you going to do? Like you have to grapple with reality and go with somebody who they're at least open to. And it's disappointing, but I think that, that's just reality.
Okay, so let me ask you this. When you say disappointing, is Matt Gaetz the kind of guy that you would want as the attorney general just based on these allegations and his behavior? I guess that's my question.
I mean, first off, I get very skeptical of it seems like every single candidate we put forward gets allegations like this. I mean, go back to Brett Kavanaugh and, the absolute ludicrous nature of those allegations. I mean, and you have an FBI investigation that shouldn't leak, but the contents of which do seem to leak, despite the fact that the FBI doesn't bring charges. And then this Hegseth thing, again, also looks very, very suspicious because you've got a case that was closed, no charges ever brought, and yet some of these salacious details come to light 4 years later. This just keeps seeming to happen with Republican candidates. And so I have a default position of skepticism until I see something substantial. So that's my view as to the first part. And then I guess the second thing is I strongly look at, my view is that President Trump should get his nominees. The Department of Justice rebelling against President Trump and launching basically an internal coup against him was the primary problem he dealt with during the entire 4 years of the first administration. So even if Gaetz is not the person I would have chosen, if I were the president selecting my attorney general, I have a very strong view that the president should get the person he wants to be his attorney general. So that's why it's disappointing.
Sure, certainly he has his right to do that and to pick who he wants. I certainly agree with you there. And listen, I'll be the first one to admit, Will, I'm not pro-Trump. I'm anti-Trump. I don't like the man. I didn't vote for him. With that being said, you're right. He does have the right. He was the elected as the president. So I'm with you on that one. I guess when I hear from you had mentioned Pete Hegseth, when I hear just about character, not necessarily breaking the law, but about character, and then he pays this woman off. And I understand not everybody that commits a crime or did anything wrong, sometimes they do pay people off because they just want the story to go away. I understand that. But with that being said, isn't there a little bit of a credibility issue there when he claims he didn't do anything wrong? I read parts of the police report that CNN obtained. It's pretty bad, but you're right. He wasn't convicted of anything. He wasn't even charged with anything. So you're right about that. But then he pays her off. And I'm thinking to myself, and this is just me, Will, the way I think, I guess, is if somebody is making up lies about me, I'm going to go after them in the courts for defamation. He never did that. Instead, he just threw money at her. Does that concern you at all?
No, I mean, it's sensible given the context of the time. I mean, this is the peak of Me Too. He's got a job and a family to support. I don't begrudge him for, signing basically getting a settlement that included an NDA and saying, it is regardless of the truth of this allegation, I would rather the world in which I am down 50 grand or whatever. And this person is prohibited from talking or speaking about this at all in the future is better than the world where I have to win a defamation case against them. And because speaking as a lawyer and someone who understands defamation law, it is the least plaintiff friendly area of law in the United States in terms of civil litigation, given New York Times v. Sullivan and a number of other cases that put an incredibly high burden on plaintiffs. So if you're saying I just bring a defamation suit, it's like, well, can I absolutely 100% prove that she is lying? No, then probably a bad idea. So, and then given that, what he stands to lose as someone who is in his position, I don't begrudge him settling the case.
I guess when I look at a Marco Rubio, and I'm not a Marco Rubio fan, however, he has a lot of experience, right, in governing. So I look at that pick, Will, and I say to myself, okay, I'm not a big Marco Rubio guy, but I understand that pick makes sense to me. I look at somebody like Pete Hegseth, who I understand he served this country, and I respect anybody who serves this country honorably, but he's a weekend anchor at Fox News. He doesn't want women serving on the battlefield, which I find a little bit bizarre. And yes, I agree with everything you said from a legal standpoint, of course, but he still has a checkered history as far as womanizing and cheating. And I'm not saying that should be a reason why you don't appoint somebody to a certain position, but I guess for me, it's just like a character thing. Doesn't seem like he has a guy of higher moral compass, I guess, for lack of a better term. So what would you say to somebody like me who feels that way?
I mean, so I start with, if the American people really cared deeply about this, they wouldn't have elected a guy who just has 3 marriages to his own name, but they did. The alternative in this instance was a vice presidential candidate who beat his, has credible allegations of slapping his then girlfriend a decade ago. I mean, we are, I think, this is a 25-year-old argument that I think has been settled in the opposite direction. I think we're to the point as a country where we're very outcome driven in terms of what we want. And I don't think a single Democrat, reverse the situation. Democrats in Congress were dealing with a Secretary of Defense nominee that Biden had put up with Hegseth history. I don't think there would be a single vote against his confirmation from the Democrat side. I don't think there's a world where they would go against their president with this little bit of a record. And then in terms of, that's just, kind of a substantive comparison, but normatively, I look at a guy like Hegseth and I say, the DOD has been wasting a huge amount of money, and I'm tired of these former generals who were previously on the board of defense contractors being the Secretary of Defense. I think there's a foundational revolving door problem going on at the Department of Defense, where you have this consistent situation where, 4-star generals get kind of underpaid while they're in service, but they make that up by going back and making all that money back, serving on the board of directors in the private sector. And that just sends a signal to every single secretary, not just the Secretary of Defense, but everybody else in charge of procurement and spending at DOD, that if you play ball, there's one of these cushy positions waiting for you. It doesn't need to be an explicit quid pro quo at all if this is the system. And I think that Hegseth has the ability to take a hammer to it. And I think the fact that he's not of the essentially the Pentagon brass, the Pentagon elite, is a huge feather in his cap, because boy, do we need reform at the Pentagon. It's an absolute mess. We spend so much money, and it seems pretty obvious that if tomorrow they had to wake up to defend Taiwan, they wouldn't be able to do it, for example. And I think I've just read enough books about Pentagon graft. I mean, stuff like the Fat Leonard scandal in the Navy. I mean, if you really want to look at the state of morals and ethics in the current United States military, go read about the Fat Leonard scandal in the Navy, where it turned out huge numbers of starred generals were taking prostitutes and 3 Michelin star dinners from a defense contractor in Southeast Asia, and it went on for like 2 decades.
That's horrible. That's absolutely horrible. And I don't doubt anything that you're saying. With that being said, what are your thoughts on his beliefs that he doesn't think that women should serve on the ballot? Because I think that's outrageous, in my opinion.
I think that's perfectly sensible. I think there's plenty of roles for women in the military that don't involve being anywhere near the battlefield. In terms of they shouldn't be part of combat units, they shouldn't be on submarines. It just seems quite obvious that the consequences to unit cohesion are substantial. The consequences to, especially potential lowering of physical standards, I don't think that's necessary at all. And I think there's, the tip of the spear, especially in places like the Navy or the Marines or something like that, is so small in terms of when you talk about actual combat units. It's not a substantial amount of the force. And there's tons of roles for women to be in the military, and that doesn't even, they really want to, be dropping bombs in the battlefield. Go be in the Air Force. There's no problem there. But ground forces in the military, no.
Yeah. Let me ask you something to that. Well, what if the physical standards weren't lowered, but they were the same standard for men or women? If you're female and you pass that same standard that a man has to pass, then why not allow them on the? I guess that's my question.
I mean, I think the fundamental dynamics between men and women generally, in terms of creating internal drama within a combat unit, probably militate against that even then.
All right. I mean, I guess perhaps that's why I want you on, though, to hear your thoughts on these issues, even though we might not agree on everything. If you're just joining us, by the way, he is Will Chamberlain. He is the senior counsel at the Article 3 Project and the IAP. Okay, Will, here's the $1 million question. You've talked about this in the last week or two. What do you think are the main reasons? Because I don't think it's one reason why Donald Trump won. Why do you think? And I'll get your thoughts on this too. I don't think this is a mandate, because Trump won somewhere around 2% of the popular vote that he won. So yes, he won the popular vote. He won the Electoral College, but I don't really consider it a mandate, because I still feel like half the country doesn't like him and didn't vote for him. Almost half the country. So what are your thoughts on that? I guess that's my first part of the question. And then my second part, which I had asked, what do you think of the reasons why Donald Trump won?
I mean, I think the mandate starts with the idea that there are more people who voted for Donald Trump than voted for Kamala Harris. And that's the first time that, that's the first time Republicans have won the popular vote in 20 years, since Bush in his second term, post-Iraq, and that was considered a mandate. I think, and I think given the context of everything that was thrown at Trump over the course of the past 24 months, from 4 indictments in 4 different jurisdictions in a little over 4 months, most of which were utterly frivolous. And then that combined with the overall, the other attempt to completely bankrupt him in New York with an absolutely frivolous civil suit against him, combined, you look at all the things that were thrown at him, and at the end of it, the American people said, yeah, that's great, but we're still going to vote for him. And we're not only going to just eke him in with slight electoral college win, we're going to give him a 1.5 points on the popular vote too. That's, I think, a pretty powerful mandate in terms of like what the American people said. We hear everything you've said and everything you've thrown at him, and we do not care. Okay, well, clearly there's something to his policies. And I think if that gets to the reason why he won. I talked with some Democrats, and especially some people who are kind of more interested in trying to figure out what went wrong on their side. And I think foundationally, the problem the Democrats were dealing with is that their base was radically misaligned with the median voter in this country on two of the major 3 issues. And that would be both immigration and crime. They weren't, first off, the economy's bad. That hurts too, obviously, and inflation being bad, et cetera. But the base voter in the Democrats thinks we should have an open border and wide open mass illegal immigration. And the median voter thinks that's a horrible idea and is actually supportive of mass deportations. That bridge is almost impossible to gap to work with. In terms of what the base wants on crime, the Democratic base is wildly out of line with the rest of the country on crime, in terms of wanting defunding the police, leniency, criminal justice reform, whereas the median voter wants enforcement. And so the combination of those 2 things mean that I think the swing voter, the person that's actually deciding this election, all of their policy interests align with Trump. Trump is able to run on the platform he announced. The only real issue that was where he probably had some tension with the median voter was abortion, and he radically disavowed the right-wing position on that to get to the center.
Did he?
And so,
did he?
Yeah.
Because on a debate stage, he was asked if there was an abortion bill put on his desk as president, would he veto the bill? And he wouldn't even answer that question, whether he would veto it or not.
Yeah, that's the attempt to try and not absolutely alienate his own base. Mm-hmm. So, but I think he did a lot more, saying things like I think at a point he said he would never support a national abortion ban at the federal level, believe in the exceptions, criticized Florida, for example, for putting in place a 6-week ban. Mm-hmm. So, that's a lot more. You compare that to what Kamala tried to do on the things that people found unpopular. For example, say the position she took 4 years ago, where she decided to support having taxpayer-funded gender reassignment surgery for prisoners and illegal aliens detained.
Wasn't that a policy that was implemented under the Donald Trump administration?
Certainly not for illegal aliens, and to the extent that
for prisoners. You're right.
For prisoners, but
right.
Here's the difference. I don't think that President Trump had his fingerprints on that at all, in the sense of this is something, mid-level, low-level bureaucrats were doing. If somebody had said to President Trump, do you think this should happen? I think we'd have been like, what? No. So, and I think most people, that's why that line of defense from the Democrats didn't work, because I think most people would have had to just sort of intuitively realize that the difference between Kamala bragged about doing this in California. She's on video bragging about how she used her influence to push across the line these gender reassignment surgeries for convicted felons. And Trump did the opposite. And as a result, that's, I think, the Democratic base is just wildly out of line with the median voter on that. The median voter thinks that's insane, and that's why Trump drowned her with ads. The Trump campaign smartly realized, oh, we're onto something here. Median voters, swing voters think this is insane, so we're just going to drown her in 100 million ads. And the difference between Trump and again, back to my original point, which is what did Trump and Kamala do differently in terms of trying to run to the center away from previously unpopular positions? Trump would disavow them, and Kamala just had some staffer on background go to a journalist and say, oh, she doesn't support that anymore. But she never said anything. She never posted anything. And the consequence of that is, well, the median voter looks at that and is like, well, maybe doesn't even hear about this random disavowal in some random newspaper, but is certainly watching the ad on Sunday Night Football that shows her on tape saying how wonderful it is that we have reassignment surgeries for convicted felons. They had to do a lot more to deal with that. And I don't know but it gets to the other problem, which is again this disconnect between the median voter and her base, which means that she has these positions she just can't even really talk about, because if she goes to the center, she alienates her voters.
I don't think there's any question that her campaign made a lot of mistakes. The messaging wasn't always on par with what the average American voter wanted. There were a lot of mistakes that were made, and you pointed some of those out for sure. Okay, so let me give you my perspective here. I'm a registered independent. I lean to the left. Most people would characterize it, even though I didn't vote for Barack Obama, I didn't vote for Hillary Clinton. Just to give you a little background on my voting history, I did vote for Joe Biden. I did vote for Kamala Harris. There are things about Donald Trump that concern me, and I think I want to hear from you, your thoughts on that. Number one, when he talks about the enemy within, talks about hiring our own military to go after certain members of the media, to go after somebody that he might not like, a political rival, an Adam Schiff, for example. That concerns me. I think deporting 20 million illegal immigrants and separating families is not something that I would certainly think is a very good idea. I don't know how he would do that. I think it would pummel the economy. I think his tariffs are an absolute joke. I was just interviewing Mark Cuban a few weeks ago, and some other friends of mine that have a lot of money. They don't think, even some that voted for Donald Trump, they think this is a really bad idea. I think that's very concerning to me. Yes, I do think some of the people that he's hired so far to be put in his administration, like a Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who I think is an absolute kook conspiracy theorist, who might have some good ideas as well. But I think he has, some crazy things that he talks about, whether it be COVID, going after certain ethnicities, the comments he's made in the past about vaccines. So I have a lot of concerns, and I look at Donald Trump's first 4 years. He got us $8.2 trillion in debt. I look at the economy that he left Joe Biden. Obviously, a big part of that, right, was because of COVID. But I thought his handling of COVID was an F-. 15 cases down to 0. It's going to be gone by Easter. Turning COVID press conferences, Will, into campaign rallies, it seemed. And yes, we can go to his behavior, the things he says. But, a part of it to me is policy. A big part of it, of course, is incitement of violence, what took place on January 6th, the fact that he still doesn't admit that he lost the 2020 election. So I know I just gave you a long laundry list there, Will.
Yeah, that's a laundry list.
I know.
I'll pick a few to start talking about.
Sure. Please
let's start. I think let's start with mass deportation, right? This is an important point, and I hear this one, especially family separation. Families are separated every single day in this country as a result of people committing crimes. Let's start there. You commit a crime, and you go to get arrested or you're convicted of a crime, you are separated from your family if you have children. Sorry, that's the way it works, right? Like, family separation in this country is not seen as a reason to not punish people for committing crimes and to not enforce the law. So very simply put, and I think Tom Homan was mildly flippant, but he had a good point here, which is that if you're an illegal immigrant family, we don't have to separate you to deport you. We can deport you altogether.
Can I ask you something about that, Will?
Sure.
So a part of me certainly agrees with you, but let's get rid of the violent criminals first, right? Let's get rid of the people that are a danger to society. I'm with you on that. I'm with Republicans. I think most of the country agrees on that. You come into this country illegally and you commit a violent crime, or get out. We want you out. We want you behind bars. I'm 100% on board. The things that I'm concerned about, Will, and you can tell me your thoughts on this. Let's just say someone's been living in this country for decades. They're not documented. They have kids that were born here. I'm not saying they shouldn't have to, pay a fine or have some sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Pay some sort of price for breaking the law. But you have a family here, you have kids here. I'm not saying, okay, you're all of a sudden you're documented. I'm not saying it should be that easy, but I just don't think we should be getting rid of those people who pay taxes, who are not violent criminals. And I think there should be some sort of easier pathway to citizenship for those people. Does that make sense?
I understand that argument and just simply disagree with it. I think if you're, and this is, I might disagree when it comes to something like dreamers, right? Like, I'd say to a dreamer, it's like, I think Blake Masters actually had a very good take on dreamers, which is essentially dreamers can be granted permanent residence, but no citizenship, right? Like, basically the idea being that if your first contact with this country is to have entered illegally, if you were brought here against, you were 3 and you had no involvement in it, this is the only language, blah, blah, blah. It's like, okay, you can have permanent residence, but you're not going to be a citizen. Like, we're never going to grant citizenship on the basis of illegal immigration. And I think that is, you have to think about the incentive structure that you're creating for people to do this, right? If you suddenly say, oh, well, you've been here a really long time, then we're going to overlook your, crossing illegally.
Right.
That's a massive incentive for people to cross illegally. And I think foundationally, one of the reasons I find the Democrat position, the moderate position, to actually be the worst of all worlds. I think pure open borders would be more moral than the Democrat position, and I'll explain. The Democrat position of sort of this middling, weak enforcement of immigration law and wanting to, we have a border, we have lots of border security, but if you make it across, we'll take you. And if you stay long enough, we'll want to let you get away with citizenship. You're putting people into the hands of the cartels. That's what you're doing when you do that, because you're dangling a reward. Well, in tort law, there's something called attractive nuisance. Have you ever heard of this?
Yes, I have. Yep.
Right. The idea that if you on your lawn have like a dangerous thing that would attract children and they harm themselves, even if those children are trespassing, you, the homeowner, are liable because you've created a danger on your property. I view the Democrat policy on immigration is to create a massive attractive nuisance for illegal immigrants, to draw them into this country, to plunge them into an unbelievably dangerous journey in the hands of drug cartels across, death. I mean, I think that's just appalling. So I think open borders is more ethical than that. But since I think the foremost obligation of our government is to its own citizens, and clearly the American public is demanding enforcement of immigration law. Trump explicitly ran on the promise of mass deportation. He made no bones about it, and he won more votes than the Democrats. I think
he did. But if somebody would say to you, well, in 2016, he ran on, we're going to build a wall and Mexico's going to pay for it. He didn't really accomplish that either, though. So that's why I don't think they're going to deport. I don't know what your thoughts on this, but I don't think they're going to deport 20 million people. I don't think it's plausible. I don't know how they're going to do it. They haven't really explained how they're going to do it. Getting rid of the violent criminals, let's do it. Number one priority, good. Let's get that done. I'm with you. But I just don't think it's plausible that they're going to be deporting 20 million people. How would they even do that?
I think you have, obviously you start by, you deport one at a time, right? You deport 1 million at a time. Let's start with deporting 1 million at the top of the list. But the other part of this is obviously going to rely on some amount of self-deportation by really cracking down on employing illegal immigrants, right? Like really aggressively cracking down. So at the point, it's like, I think basically there should be federal laws that ban, for example, the giving out of driver's licenses to illegal immigrants, the giving out of, and all these little benefits that little states are trying to give to illegal immigrants. Those should be banned at the federal level. Shouldn't be allowed. And you just basically this should not be a hospitable country if you're an illegal immigrant. If you're an illegal immigrant, you should be in your day-to-day life recognizing that this sucks. I want to go home. Like that should be that should be instantiated federal law and put down through the rest of the country, and that will ultimately lead to self-deportation and then a return to a world where people, if they want to immigrate to this country, they feel like the answer is not to just go plunge themselves into the hands of a coyote and cross the border. The answer is wait in line.
I know, but I just don't think it should take 10 years in so many different cases, 10 years to become a naturalized citizen. I think we need to do something about that. I also never hear about those who overstay their visas. I mean, you look at the millions and millions of people. We didn't hear that in the Trump administration. We certainly didn't hear that in the Biden administration. We only hear about border crossings, which is important. I'm not saying that's not important, but there are a lot of people in this country that overstay their visas, and I never hear any solutions to that either, Will,
I mean, the solutions are sort of, both increased and substantially increased enforcement and substantially increased cracking down on the employability of illegal immigrants. Like you make life in this country inhospitable to illegal immigrants, and there's a lot of ways you can do that. And basically it's the opposite of what a lot of these blue states have been doing, which is they've been actively trying to make things more hospitable to illegal immigrants, which feeds right back into the attractiveness.
Yeah, I understand that. I think you make some very valid points there. The last thing when it comes to, this is what frustrates me, and I don't think you do this, but some of the MAGA Republicans, they'll talk about Lincoln Riley, right? Horrible situation, terrible crime. I hope that guy, I wish he would get the electric chair. I'm for capital punishment, by the way, which he's not going to get. But with that being said, there were also people that were killed and brutally murdered under the Trump administration, too. I mentioned some of those names yesterday. Do I blame Donald Trump for that? No. Do I necessarily blame Joe Biden for this murder? No. I think Republicans and Democrats need to work together there. What I don't like is they're eating our cats and dogs. That turned out not to be true. Sometimes people make it sound like if you're an illegal in this country, they're going to rape your wife and kidnap your kids. A small percentage of these people do very bad things. We both don't want those kinds of people in this country. I'm with you. I just don't like that rhetoric. And I thought when Trump and Vance did that in Springfield, Ohio, and said the eating the cats and the dogs, there were bomb threats and over 50 threats to that city. I just thought that was wrong. I think there's a way of going about it like what you're doing and what you're discussing and what you're talking about than talking about, legal Haitian immigrants eating cats and dogs. I thought that was wrong. I don't know what your thoughts are.
I think it's a little bit of a stretch to call them legal immigrants. Like they have temporary protected status from deportation because they
Right.
do, right? Like that's calling them legal immigrants are people who've gone through the system and have,
Right.
gotten visas.
But even if they were illegal, let's just say 100% for argument's sake, I'm on your side there. Let's just say, even though under the Biden administration, they were technically not illegal. But even if that was true, I still don't like it when the day before the presidential debate, when J.D. Vance and Donald Trump were told that these stories were not true, because we've learned in reports that they were told from the city manager to the mayor to the Republican governor, this is not true. And if J.D. Vance says, well, my constituents, I got some reports, that still doesn't mean it's true. And then
this is where I flat disagree with you. I think the city manager, makes claims that they're not true, but that how does he know? Right? How does he know that didn't happen? Did he fully investigate? He's just saying, oh, we don't have that. So I don't buy that. It's like if he's saying I have reports from constituents that say X, and then the city manager says, well, I haven't heard about those reports. It's like, okay, but like right now, we're at a point where it's like there needs to be more investigation, not the city manager's word is bond on this question.
Well,
I think the city manager had to retract something, didn't he?
That's my understanding. Said that there were no credible reports of that. We do have a report of
Credible's doing a lot of work in that sense.
Right. But I mean, there was one white guy who's an American who was, I guess, taking geese from the park. We did have a report of that. I guess the only point I'm trying to make is there are better ways to make your argument, not you personally, but Donald Trump and J.D. Vance than what they did, which I thought were completely embarrassing. These Mexicans crossing the border, they're rapists, they're bad people. And I suppose some of them are good people. I just wish the conversation would start as, even if you do believe, like you do, Will, that 20 million people should be deported. Okay, that's a fair let's have that conversation like we are. But I just think the conversation that bothers me is painting the majority of these people out to be horrible people that want to come here and rape your wife and kidnap your family. I think you get what I'm saying, right? There's a way to have
I get that part of it.
Yeah. I
don't necessarily agree that Vance and Trump are doing that, but I agree. I understand that perspective. I think in general, there is this strange. I think one of the things that the Trump election, especially Trump winning more votes than Kamala, is a lot of people like, oh, this is so embarrassing. Trump is so, and I'm like, well, clearly not to the bulk of the public, right? Like there's this sort of, you're wondering about who is the person that you're embarrassed to say these things in front of. It's like the American people. Okay, well, the American people just voted for the guy, and I'm not just and not.
I hear you. I hear you. I hear what you're saying, but here's my, for lack of a better term, retort to that. I think the last poll that I saw, 6 to 7 out of 10 registered Republicans still believe that Donald Trump won the 2020 election. That leads me to believe that more than half of Republicans in this country that vote believe every single word that Donald Trump says. He lies a lot. He misconstrues the truth. He says things a lot of the time that are not true. I'm not saying every person that voted for Donald Trump is ill-informed. I'm not saying every person that voted for Donald Trump is not intelligent, but I do think a lot of people in his base are ill-informed. Do I have that wrong?
I mean, I think it really depends on what you consider to be ill-informed. I'd look at Democrats and think that they're wildly ill-informed. I always had conversations with Democrats and I'd bring up stuff about, for example, like trans issues. And their retort would be, these are moderates. And so they wouldn't be like, these are not base Democrats who are like, oh, great, wonderful.
Sure.
Massive men who have gone through puberty beating up on women like that. No, that's not what these people are. But they'd constantly be saying things like, oh, that's not really happening. Or oh, that's not happening. That's not a big deal. And it's like, you're misinformed. Actually, it's happening enough to be on every's radar. And can
we talk about that, Will? If you have a couple more minutes, if you have the time, I really appreciate this conversation, and I'll say this as a compliment to you. Some Republicans that I have on the show don't exactly explain their positions as well as you do. So that's a testament to you and a compliment to you. But I do want to talk about transgenders, if I may. So here's my quick position on it, right? I think it is. I did a video on this on social media yesterday. I think it's absurd that people believe in this country that if you're born a man, transition to a woman, you should be able to compete against other women on the playing field. I think most people in this country feel that way. And if they don't, I think they're an idiot. I'm going to be very clear on that. It's absurd.
I think that's a very that strikes me as obvious, and it's bizarre that there's a 20% that public disagrees.
Yeah, and I had Seth Moulton on the show yesterday, and he had made a similar statement that I just made, and Democrats were attacking him, and I'm like, what the hell is going on in this country? So let's start there where we agree. That's absurd, right? Leah Thomas, a perfect example of that.
Yeah.
Nancy Mace, here's my issue with some of the Republicans out there, not all, but some.
Yeah.
So Nancy Mace doesn't want a colleague to use the same female restroom as her. Now, my position is I don't care what restroom people use. I don't believe that someone is a transgender because the only reason why they became a transgender is because they want to go into a woman's restroom and physically assault somebody or something. I'm not buying that at all. I don't care, but that's just my personal opinion. Nancy Mace has a different opinion. Fine. In the last 2 days, she's tweeted 200 times about this issue. She's put out videos and she's grandstanding on it. Yet when there's a school shooting where innocent children die, she'll put up one tweet usually that says thoughts and prayers. I have a serious problem with that. Okay, fine. You don't think that trans women should be in the women's restroom. Fine. Put out your tweet, do your video. She's been talking about it all week, Will. And I'm saying to myself, I think there are more important issues than that. And she seems to be obsessed with this issue, for lack of a better term.
Maybe, but I mean, I can understand that people would be focused on issues that they're personally involved in and that personally affect them. And this is one. All of a sudden, I mean, Nancy Mace is a sexual assault victim by her own testimony and has said that she is straight up not comfortable with having biological males in her bathroom. She would like that to not happen. I think that's a perfectly reasonable request. I think that I think that one of the ways in which, especially, I think this is one of those cases where I think Democrats would do well to listen to feminists who speak on this issue and the ways in which these trans inclusionary policies actually end up invading and really essentially making women uncomfortable in what are supposed to be their private spaces. And I think that, what Nancy Mace's positions under this is perfectly reasonable to me. And it's her piece, it's her idea, it's her piece of legislation. She's taking endless incoming. I mean, the flack that she's taking from, both her and her staffers are taking online. Like we talked about the bomb threats or whatever that you were talking about in Springfield. Well, her staff have gotten death threats galore.
That's horrible. Yeah, I don't condone any of that.
And so I don't. But that sort of would justify why is she talking about this so much? Well, I think she struck a nerve. So I don't begrudge her for it, and I think her position is eminently reasonable.
Yeah, I just want transgenders to live their life and be who they are. I want people who are gay to be happy with who they are. I don't have a problem with gay marriage. I don't have a problem with Gay Pride Month. I don't have a problem with drag queens reading books to kids. And when I ask Republicans, many of them who are against drag queen reading, I say, can you name me one example of a child that was killed at a drag queen reading? Can you name me one example of a child that was sexually assaulted by a drag queen reading a book? And it seems like there are a lot of MAGA Republicans that are fixated on these issues, but they don't want to talk about the woman's right to choose. They don't want to talk about gun control.
I mean, should we let children read pornography? Like, should children be able to go to the store and buy hardcore?
Right, but I think I'll answer that, but I think that's a different topic than drag queen reading. I've been to some of these drag queen readings because I wanted to learn for myself, and there was no pornography.
Sure, but I mean, it undermines the sort of point of like, oh well, nobody dies at these drag queen readings. It's like, well, that does not end the debate about.
So there are things that are inappropriate. You're right. Do I think that children, 10-year-olds, 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds, should be reading books that have pornography in it? No. Do I think that's happening a lot in society? No. If it is happening, and if it is happening, yes, those books would be inappropriate for children. But the point I'm trying to make, it seems to me, and you can tell me if you disagree, that there are a lot of MAGA Republicans out there. When I say MAGA Republican, I mean people that are far to the right, just like you would disagree with people that are far to the left, that they seem to want to talk more about these issues than about gun control, or, for example, healthcare. We've heard for 9 years that Donald Trump wants to go away with Obamacare. Yet on a debate stage, he says he has concepts of a plan. Why has he not sat down for a couple hours and come up with a plan with some policymakers? So that's my frustration. They want to talk about drag queen reading, and they want to talk about pornography in books, which I don't necessarily agree with, by the way. Why are they not talking more about a replacement plan for healthcare, and why hasn't he come up with a plan?
Well, I mean, I guess we'll take those issues. We'll start with the two issues you highlight and then go back to the trans one. How about that? That seems like it's three. Yeah. Gun control, I mean, obviously conservatives have a fundamental disagreement with the left about the proper way to handle that. And there's also, I think, the bigger sort of reason why this debate is actually a little bit less salient is because the Second Amendment in this country, especially as interpreted by the Supreme Court recently, is extraordinarily robust. So I don't think, even if Democrats could put in place whatever policy Democrats could get in place if they had the political power to do so, given the constraints of existing Supreme Court precedent, I just don't think it would have any meaningful difference on our on school safety. I think that honestly, the only real route to really increasing school safety is actually things like Republican proposals for hardening school security guards at schools, things like that. I don't think there's a world where
Can I ask you
Sure.
about that? Hardening
Mhm.
schools. So after the Uvalde, Texas shooting, right? Terrible tragedy. We'll both agree on that.
Mhm.
Ted Cruz talked about hardening schools, and he said that a locked door, the door in the back of the school, should have been locked. And we heard J.D. Vance on a debate stage talk about windows need to be stronger. Do you really think, Will, that an 18-year-old that just shot his grandmother in the face would see a deterrent in a door being locked or a window? I just don't see that. When you're holding an AR-15 or an assault weapon with thousands of rounds of ammunition, I don't think a locked door. Now, an armed security guard, sure. There are a lot of schools in this country that do have armed security guards. I'm totally fine with that. But I just feel I feel like hardening schools, they're not only talking about armed security guards, but they're talking about locked doors. They're talking about windows being stronger. My personal opinion, Will, I think the age needs to be 18 to 21. I think we need to implement the same assault weapons ban that was implemented and fizzled out in the early 90s. I think there needs to be some mandatory training, because if you or I are in a store and there's an active shooter situation, if you have a gun, I want to make sure that you're at least trained on how to use the gun. Give me a couple hours of that. I just think there are things we can do as a society to make us safer. And I personally, and we'll probably disagree on this, but I personally don't think more guns necessarily make us safer. And I think Uvalde, Texas is a perfect example of that, when you had a bunch of coward police officers that refused to go into the classroom. And because of that, probably more innocent children died. So I think if we did a couple things differently, besides maybe just hardening schools, as you put it, I think there are things we can do. I'm a Second Amendment guy. I think you have the right to own a gun. We should all be allowed to protect ourselves with weapons. I just think there are things we can do moving forward that could make things better.
So this is a good example of what I mean by the Supreme Court kind of getting in the way of this stuff. So I think the assault weapons ban that was formulated in the 90s would not pass constitutional muster anymore. The big problem there is the Heller discussion about the limitation on banning guns that are in common use. The AR-15 is the most common gun in the country. So I don't think any restriction on the AR-15 could be past constitutional muster. It's not a machine gun, right? So like that, I think, so when you're talking about like, why aren't we talking about more about gun control? It's like, I think that maybe this is one of those areas where if you haven't really thought about the fact that an AR-15 ban would not pass constitutional muster, which means that whatever category of gun you're trying to ban, you're not going to get AR-15s. You're going to get machine guns, but those have been banned for decades. So, you're not going to get AR-15s in that gun ban anymore, not through the Supreme Court. So that makes the gun control debate kind of seem, this is what I mean by like, whatever the Democrats could even do if they had the political power to do so would not change the situation on the ground. So I think that's why hardening. And so when you talk about, oh, well, windows and doors, and that probably wouldn't stop that 15-year-old. I think you need to think about these things incrementally, like, the process of the hardening schools as like an overall project. You want to, single point of entry and exit with security guards and more robust defenses elsewhere. That's what you're trying to accomplish. That would help.
I'm okay with that.
Ultimately,
I'm okay with that.
Then to answer the original question is why we care about why. So that's an answer of why we don't care that much about that issue, or why that's not talked about.
What about the 90? What about the 99% of other gun violence throughout the country? Though obviously we have, sadly, school shootings, but I want to come up with solutions. I don't hear a lot of reasonable solutions from people on the far right. I talk to a lot of reasonable Republicans on a daily basis, and we come up with a lot of things that we agree upon. But I just feel like there's more we could do to make it safer for people in this country.
But I think a big part of why that's such a hard thing to do, like, you talk about the 99% of other gun crime, a huge chunk of that happens in liberal cities run by progressive prosecutors that aren't really enforcing those laws effectively enough. They're not keeping their citizens safe. A lot of those.
In some circumstances, like Chicago, sure, but I think you
Chicago,
can also take,
Philly, Larry
right,
Krasner.
right. But I mean, you're also
LA
talking
until recently. The Democrats finally got their act together in LA and kicked out their horrible district attorney that they have there. But
I mean,
before that,
sure, but I mean, the larger populations in the bigger cities, of course, are going to have more crime. There's a gang problem, certainly in Chicago. But I guess from my perspective, I don't care whether it's a Democrat city or a Republican city. I don't care whether it's black, white, you name it, gang violence. Gun violence to me is gun violence. And we have a big problem in this country. And what we're doing right now is not working, right? Republican or Democrat. What we're doing in this country is not working. Some changes need to be made. It doesn't mean that Republicans and Democrats are going to agree on everything, but I just don't feel like anything really is being done about it. And we had one of the biggest shootings, as you know, Will, right in my backyard here in Las Vegas. 61 people were killed. Guy legally was able to go into a store. He bought all these weapons. I don't know how you can stop somebody from doing something like that. I don't have all the answers. I just want a few things, to be changed. I want mandatory training. Doesn't matter what gun you buy. Give me 2 hours of training so you know how to hold a gun, you know how to shoot a gun, you know how to store a gun. We don't even have that. I mean, I know driving a car is a privilege, and I know owning a gun is a right. I get that. But when you get your driver's license, as you know, well, you have to take a test, physical test. You have an instructor right next to you. You have to know how to operate the vehicle. You have to re-register your car, all that stuff. We don't have basically almost any of those benchmarks when it comes to guns, and I just have a problem with that.
I mean, I can understand that, and I know some states do still, even under a Heller and whatever, have even if the permits are shall issue, they're allowed to place certain training requirements on you to do that. I don't have I don't really have an issue with that. I don't think that's that big a deal. Sure. I also just don't think that those changes in those laws would be that consequential, and especially in terms of the school shooting problems that you talk about, either in gun violence or school shootings. So
obviously mental illness.
I mean, the mental illness is a bigger issue. I think, we need to, you can look at one of the big policy mistakes of like 50 years ago was closing all the mental institutions.
Got to fund it, right?
Basically. Yeah. I mean, not just you have to fund it. It's a product of a social pushback against that as a result of what flew over the cuckoo's nest. And like a social push saying that these things were oppressive, but now we just have them on the streets, and that doesn't seem to be an improvement.
Well, Will, I probably held you way too long. I appreciate you sticking around. Really good conversation.
No worries.
I really appreciate it. Love to do it again. You guys do a great job at the Article 3 project, and love to have you on again down the road. I think it's a great conversation, and I think as Americans, we need more conversations like this. So, Will, I do appreciate your time, my friend. Congratulations on the move, by the way. And
no, thank you.
And look forward to talking to you hopefully again in the future. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Appreciate it. That's Will Chamberlain, everybody. Smart guy, senior counsel at the Article 3 Project and the IAP. So there's a guy that I could have a conversation with and probably disagree on a lot of issues. However, he states his case, I state mine. He states his case eloquently. He makes a lot of valid points. I make mine. I actually think with a guy like that, we could probably meet somewhere in the middle and probably get some things done. I wish we were both lawmakers. But unfortunately, sometimes when people make their arguments, for example, about the gun control issue, they'll just say, well, more guns make us safer. By the way, Will didn't say that because it's not true. Do I agree with hardening our schools? Not really. I don't agree with a lot of his positions. However, he states them and he backs them up with some facts and some things and reasons why he feels the same way. And I do respect that, even though, like I said, I disagree with some of the things he said. Like the transgender issue, for example, but good conversation. All right, so here's what we're going to do. Your thoughts on that conversation. I thought it was a good one. I thought it was a productive one. 702-221-7283. Before we take phone calls, we are going to take a break. I want to remind you guys the official gaming bar of the Pushing the Limits radio show is Jackson's Bar and Grill, located at Flamingo and Jones. Great promotions they have there, including the Pass the Puck contest during Vegas Golden Knights games with a chance to win up to $500 in free slot play. Mondays and Wednesdays is your opportunity to get a free bottle of wine if you earn up to 300 points. Check them out. Jackson's Bar and Grill, located at Flamingo and Jones. We just had Will Chamberlain on, leans to the right on a lot of different issues. I thought it was a good conversation. We're talking about that. I also had Joe Walsh on to start the show. We're talking about Matt Gaetz, who took his name out of the hat for the Attorney General position as well. We'll take a quick break. You take your phone calls on the other side, 702-221-7283. Take a break. Be back right after this. It's Pushing the Limits right here on KSHP.
It's time to wake up and win the weekend. You're listening to the boss of the big ball. Game Painter.
Giving you that grease.
Saturday and Sunday from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. Pacific time for the live action on Vegas Scoreboard Express on KSHP 107.1 FM and AM 1400. Dive into the game day with my in-depth analysis, expert predictions, and winning plays from the sharpest minds in sports betting. It's more than just placing bets. It's about securing wins. Head over to jbtheticket.com and be sure to tune in to KSHP this weekend from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. Pacific time to ride the winning wave with VSX. Tune in and get your money back from the sports book. All money, all sports, no bull.
You ever dreamed of having your own radio show or a podcast, but just didn't think it was possible? Well, dreams can come true. Radio U. Radio U is a 5-day course that'll teach you how to acquire your dream show. We'll teach you how to host, how to write commercial, how to interview, how to market, how to write a contract, and most importantly, how to monetize your dream radio show. You'll learn from some of the best in the business with over 75 years in broadcast experience. You'll learn from people like me. And the best part? Every single student will be live on the radio as part of the class. Plus, one student from each class will get their very own radio show. You'll be live on the air right here in Las Vegas. Radio U. The 5-day course is being offered at $699. For more information, give Radio U a call. 702-763-5024. That's 702-763-5024. Or check them out at RadioYou101.com.
Hey, everybody, are you struggling to find a pizza place that reminds you of Brooklyn? That true blue New York style pie? Well, worry no more. Stallone's Italian Eatery Pizza is a knockout. We're located at 467 East Silverado Ranch Boulevard, just off of Premium Road, half a mile east of South Point Casino, just minutes from the Las Vegas Strip. Come by and grab a slice of pie. Plus, check out our Brooklyn-inspired Italian cuisine. Our sandwiches are super. Hero, that is. Because why be a sub when you can be a hero? Stallone's Italian Eatery is here to serve you phenomenal food, Vegas. Forget about it.
All right, welcome back. It is Pushing the Limits on a Thursday. Thank you so much for joining us in what has been a very, very busy news day. We just had Will Chamberlain from Article 3 Project joining us. I knew we would disagree on a lot of issues, but he's a really intelligent guy. We were talking to him. We had Joe Walsh on, former presidential candidate, in the first segment, following the breaking news about Matt Gaetz. He will not be the attorney general. That's not a surprise. I told you guys that would most likely not happen. And we're also covering Pete Hegseth. New details in the police report from years back. Woman claiming that he basically raped her. There were no criminal charges filed. He was never convicted of a crime. However, he did pay her off. And I disagree with Will Chamberlain. I think that if you're completely innocent and you didn't do anything wrong, your first reaction wouldn't be to pay somebody off. A normal first reaction would be, oh, well, we want to go after her. We want to get her for defamation. That's all I'm saying, everybody. I think there's some truth there. 702-221-7283, the number to call. Let's go to Maureen. Maureen is first up here on PTL. Hey, Maureen.
Hello, Brian.
Hey.
I'm calling because I just watch your show. I watch it every day. But the last couple of days, it really has been very upsetting to me. I've been typing like crazy comments. And I'm curious as to why. And a lot of people are saying they can't watch the show anymore because a lot of people are reeling from what happened and scared what's happening. And then you put these men on, like the man today, it gets up, just instills in us like how upset we are about losing Harris and Waltz. And everything he said, I don't think he was intelligent. I think I went onto his Twitter, looked at what he says, and what's the point of having people like that on?
Yeah.
Except getting us more and more upset. And this whole transgender thing, Nancy Mace lost 1,000 people today are losing their jobs at Boeing, but she's talking about bathrooms. It's redundant.
I agree.
It's sickening.
I agree.
It's disgraceful. And especially because of school shootings, especially because of the housing crisis, especially about all the houses and all the people being evicted from their trailer parks.
So can I ask you something? May I ask you something about Nancy Mace? Sorry to interrupt you, my dear. Do you think I'm wrong in saying this as a woman when I say that if you're a woman who sadly has been the victim of sexual assault or rape, I don't want to hear you talking about it if you support a liable sexual abuser and you voted for Donald Trump. I think you lose all credibility, in my personal opinion. If you've been the victim of a crime, it's horrible. I don't wish that upon anybody, the victim of a sexual assault. But I don't want to hear you talk about it if you voted for Donald Trump. That's just my opinion.
First of all, I've called her office several times about the way she speaks in the Congress, the cursing. I'm 63 years old. I'm from a generation that I never even heard cursing in my household. Okay, it's not normal. And I called, and she's worth millions of dollars. Marjorie Taylor Greene's worth millions of dollars, and I'm tired, and we're exhausted from it. So I would like to have. I know you want to have opposing sides, but more people that are also positive, like YouTubers. That like Adam Mockler, who's 21 years old.
Yeah, he's
I
great.
listen to him all the time. People that will also give us some hope, and you know, because I'm like really upset right now, and I used to enjoy watching your show when I had hope, but now that we don't have any hope, we know what a disgrace this is.
Yeah.
I just feel terrible.
So
and a lot of people
don't say, okay, so hang on, hear me out on this, okay, my dear? We have the midterms in 2 years. Donald Trump will never be able to be the leader of the free world in 4 years. I know that's not what you want to hear, but we do have hope because there are people like you and people like me and people like Adam Mockler, and there are too many people in this country that are decent, good-hearted people that want what's best for the country. So don't hold out all hope. And I know that there are others that are echoing what I am saying, my dear, so don't hold out all hope. 702-221-7283 is the number to call. Let's go to Tyrone. Tyrone is next up on PTL. Hi, Tyrone.
Hey, Brian. Long time no here. Let me say this. The previous caller, there is hope. The hope is his policies are going to be so terrible. This is going to wake a lot of people up from the stupor that they've been in. You know, the old saying is, how do you cook a frog? You put them in a pot. And you slowly get the water hot until they don't realize what's going on. These people are about to live it out. They're about to get everything they're asking for. And unfortunately, we're along for the ride. But let me say this about your previous guest.
Yeah.
First of all, I thought you said you was having Wilt Chamberlain on. I was like, I thought he was dead.
You know, you're not the first person to tell me that.
I was like, what the hell? But anyway, let me say this. A couple of things. The guy talked about the transgender issue, right? Transgender, the whole sports and women going, that affects nobody's life. Maybe an individual here and there. Meanwhile, you got people in Florida losing the property value of their homes while their insurance goes through the roof, and the government, whether it's the state of Florida or the Congress, is doing nothing about it. And that's a red state. And the whole gun issue, with him talking about hardening schools and more security, I would have asked him this. When's the last time you seen somebody rob an armored truck with a baseball bat? They don't, because they know that those security guards have guns, so they meet force with force.
Agree. And I completely disagree. While we had a respectful conversation, and I appreciate him coming on, I almost disagree with everything that Will Chamberlain said. But I wanted to get to some other topics. I didn't want to stick on one topic. But as far as the gun control issue,
I agree with that.
Yeah, as far as the gun control issue, I completely disagree with what he said. I don't have a problem with armed security guards, but hardening our schools is the most, other than maybe arming security, is ridiculous. What J.D. Vance said about, stronger windows, and even Will agreed with me on that. As far as they always want to talk about the Constitution. Well, it's unconstitutional, and the Supreme Court won't pass it. You know what? You can say it's unconstitutional. Just because the Supreme Court doesn't pass something doesn't mean that it wouldn't work. And I hate that argument. I hate that argument.
And I do too. And I hate what they say about the blue cities and how the crime and all of that.
It's not factually accurate.
Right. I live here in Baltimore. The reason that the gun problem is major here is because we're between Virginia and Pennsylvania, which have absolutely no gun laws at all, is you can basically just walk and go into Pennsylvania and do straw purchases if you got a relative who live in Pennsylvania or Virginia.
Right.
So that's not necessarily accurate. And I say this again. Their day of reckoning is coming. Mm-hmm. It is coming because unless you're a billionaire, it's not for you.
Yeah.
You're not at the table. You are on the menu.
Yeah. No, you're right. Listen,
with the rest of us.
I hear you, my friend. And listen, we're on the same page there. But we need to have. That's what I do on this show. If some of you out there listen to conservative talk radio, I don't know why you would. I would imagine most of you that are listening to this show do not. Rarely do they ever interview somebody that they vehemently disagree with. I do that on this show all the time. I'll debate anybody. If people treat me with respect, I'll treat them with respect. I had the GOP chair of Nye County on the show yesterday. We had lunch afterwards, okay? I disagree with almost everything he said, but we had a long, drawn-out conversation. Same thing with Will. I think Will's a really smart guy. Disagree with him on almost everything he said. We need to have more conversations like this in our country. And you're saying, well, Brian, you call people names. Didn't call Will any names. Didn't call my guest in studio any names. You know why? Because they treated me with respect. When somebody calls into the show and they call me a Nazi, or somebody calls into the show and they just say something so blatantly ignorant and stupid and non-factual, I'm going to call you out on your stupidity. That's what I do on this show. I'm not changing what I'm doing, and I appreciate the call, my friend. 702-221-7283 is the number to call. Let's go to Darlene. Darlene is next up on PTL. Hi, Darlene.
Hi, Brian. I'm going to make a comment towards Will. Okay, I agree with you on Will that he's intelligent, but here's the problem.
Yes.
Like most of the MAGAs out there, he is misinformed. He don't know nothing about nothing. It was like you were talking to Donald Trump. I mean, if you said it was daylight, he would say it was nighttime. And everything, I only agreed with him maybe 5%, and I don't even remember what it was.
Right.
95% of that, I do not believe it, understand it. He is misinformed, I'm telling you.
Well, here's what I think when it comes to when it comes to somebody like Will. And you know, look, I respect the fact that Will came on the show. I do think he's a smart guy, but he appeals to a certain base of people. I'm not saying he's saying things necessarily that he doesn't believe. The problem I have with a lot of these people on the far right is they say things that I don't truly believe that they believe. I have a problem with those kinds of people. The issue that I have with a lot of what Will said was, you know, not focusing on what I would consider the really important issues that most Americans care about. Abortion, for example,
right.
Kind of throw that off to the side. The economy. He mentioned inflation, but then it comes to cause and effect. And look at the fact that inflation is under 3%. The reason why I didn't bring that up, I didn't want to get into the weeds with him because I wanted to get to some other topics. But, you know, they'll complain about inflation. They'll complain about things. And then as soon as Donald Trump gets into office, they won't complain about anything. That's the problem that I have.
Well, I just have one more thing to say, and then I'll go. I totally disagree. Lay off the transgender people because, listen, you guys don't mind having a rapist, liar president, but yet you're worried about a transgender using the restroom with doors. Where does that make sense, people? Please tell me where America went.
Listen, I think America went south. I think America has decided to vote for a reality TV star who's a liable sexual abuser because they didn't want to elect a woman or they think Democrats are woke. I really don't know what else to tell you, my dear. It's very frustrating. Let's go to Mark. Mark is next up on PTL. What's up, Mark?
Hey, Brian, I want to make a comment on Matt Gaetz, but first, Will.
Yeah.
Understand this. The Second Amendment, Will, was written when the major weapon was a musket, where the best soldier was able to fire 3 times a minute, not when you can load up a semi or automatic weapon and fire off 1,000 shells within 60 seconds. Number 2, Will, I lost all respect for you when you said women shouldn't serve on the battlefield. I served with them on the field, and they were just as good as men.
I completely agree with you on that one, 100%.
Now I've been following politics, Brian, for longer than you're alive. Okay, I'm 65. Longer than you're alive. I'm going to tell you a fact that the Republicans did not grow a spine because of a report that was going to come out. Matt Gaetz knew there was a report out there, but he didn't care about the report. You know what got him thrown out as AG, where they made him resign? because Matt Gaetz is hated because he threw out Kevin McCarthy out of Congress, and Kevin McCarthy has a huge following, and that's why they were against Matt Gaetz. He has a lot of enemies in there because of that. And that's why they got him out, not because of no stupid report, because that report was going to come out no matter what eventually, and he knew it.
Yeah, I don't listen. I agree with everything you just said, Mark. I was very offended, Mark, when Will said that he doesn't think women should serve on the battlefield. I think that is so absurd.
And I know he never served.
It's so well, I never served either, but I don't think you have to serve to understand that women, if they're physically have the ability to do so and they can pass a certain physical standard test, they should be allowed to risk their life as well.
You would never say that, right, Brian?
Of course not.
You would never say that.
Of course not, because I don't think, you know why? You know why, Mark? You know why?
Never served.
You know, well, it's not just that. You know why, Mark? Because I consider women as equals when it comes to human beings. Now, it doesn't mean that I think that women on the playing field are as good as men are on the playing field in certain circumstances, but we're not talking about a sport here, okay? We're talking about serving your country, okay?
Yes.
Serving your country is not a sport, and I think that if you're willing to risk your life and you could pass a physical test, and obviously Pete Hegseth, who I think is an utterly despicable boob, who should never be the defense secretary.
I saw women carry litters off the field.
Yeah.
I saw them carrying soldiers off the field. They can do it. And these people who never served, you would never hear a veteran say women should not be on the field. You know why? Because a lot of veterans saw them in action. These clowns who never served that say women shouldn't be on the field never saw them in action.
Yeah, no, you're right. And listen, the bottom line is that I disagree with him on that one. 150%. 702-221-7283. Let's go to Jack. Jack is next up on PTL. Hey, Jack.
Hey, Brian, man, what's going on? Hey, listen, I called yesterday. I wanted to talk about this topic, but you had that gentleman on, so I had to get my couple shots in on him. Have you ever heard of this guy, Stephen Spoonamore?
He's coming on the show tomorrow.
Oh, you're kidding me.
Yeah.
Would you rather me not talk about this?
No, that's okay.
Yeah.
But let me just give people a little prerequisite. There's a guy who is, I guess you can describe him as a specialist when it comes to tech and elections. He is someone who is claiming that he believes the election was rigged. I'm not making that claim. I haven't made that claim. I need to see evidence of why people would say that, just like people that said it in 2006 and 2020. I need evidence. But this guy is going to come on the show tomorrow. He's agreed to come on, and he claims that the election was stolen. This is an area where he specializes in, so I'm giving him the platform to talk about it tomorrow.
Can I give the audience a little bit of what he's going to talk about? Okay, so he's a data scientist. He's a security analysis, and it's about bullet ballots. And what a bullet ballot is when someone goes to vote and they just vote for, say, you would just vote for Donald Trump. You wouldn't vote any down ticket, any other questions that are on there, and in 5 of the battle states, Arizona, Michigan, Wisconsin, Nevada, and PA, the normal bullet ballot turnout is like 0.1%. Mm-hmm. And in the 5 battleground states, all 5 of them, it's about 7%. 7% of, you're talking about like 200,000 people, I'm supposed to believe, went in, voted for Donald Trump, didn't vote any down ticket, and then walked out. And just where you are, Brian, in Nevada, it was 6%. And then right next door in Utah, it's 1/100th of 1%.
Yeah.
So just across the border, no one did that. And then hundreds of thousands of people.
Well, so Jack, let me say this, Jack, and I'm interested after I have him on the show tomorrow. I'd like you to call in and tell me what you think. I've never said on this show that the election was stolen. I don't believe I'll say that tomorrow. But as I've done with Trumpers out there, many of them who I think are very ill-informed, if they believe they have evidence that the election was stolen in 2020, then I'll have them on and I'll challenge them on it. But nobody's provided any credible evidence to prove that. I don't know if this guy is going to be able to do that tomorrow. We'll find out. I'm giving the platform. He's going to come on. He's claiming the 2024 election was stolen. I haven't seen any evidence to show that with any validity at all, but we'll find out. 702-221-7283. Let's go to Bonnie. I believe Bonnie is next up on the PTL radio show. Hey, Bonnie, thanks for calling in. What's on your mind?
Brian.
Hey.
I can't shut my thing off. I just wanted to make a comment about the drag queens.
Yeah.
Please tell me and ask all your listeners, why are drag queens not acceptable? And even in life.
I'll tell you why.
I'll tell you why. To do reading. Why are they not accepted? But Disney characters,
right,
and Halloween costumes.
I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why.
Just another thing to think about is the Trump loyalty prayer that from Oklahoma that they want to put in place that will force the schools. Unless, if they don't, they'll be severely punished. But under Putin's Project 2025, and it won't matter who is in office, just let your listeners beware and please ask them to think. Brian,
I will.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you, and I'll give you the answer. The reason why so many MAGA Republicans out there are against drag queens are the same reason why so many MAGA Republicans out there are against the LGBTQ community. Why? Because they don't approve. They're bigots. Unless you're exactly like me, unless you exactly look like me and talk like me and act like me, I'm not going to accept you because I'm a bigot. That's why. That's the way many of these MAGA Republicans think. That's why. Sad, but true. Let's go to Colin. Colin is next up on PTL. Hey, Colin, what's going on?
Hey, Brian. I'm wondering that because, if some, like what Tom Homan said, that, like he goes into blue states, that he will be able to, like, put the military on him, and I don't think that's going to happen.
Yep. Yeah. Well, it's a good thing you bring up, and I'm going to give you my opinion on that. I don't think they're going to deport 20 million people. Do I think they're going to go after criminals? Yes, I do. And when I mean criminals, I don't mean people that just cross the border illegally. I mean violent. And by the way, I don't have a problem with that. I think they're talking a tough game because they're using scare tactics because they want to, I guess, scare people that are in this country illegally in hopes that they will leave the country. I think that's probably why they're doing it. And the other reason is because their base loves it. I don't think they're going to be deporting grandmothers. I don't think they're going to be deporting people that have lived in this country for decades that are paying their taxes. But I will say this. If they do, I will not recognize the country that I live in. I will not recognize the United States of America if we are going to separate families and go into homes and deport families with children that were born here and separate families. I will be dismayed. I will be disappointed. I will be upset. And I know you will probably as well, Colin.
Yeah, I will.
Yeah. I mean, I think I'm hopeful that won't happen, Colin. That's the best thing I can say. I don't think it will, but I don't know for sure. Nobody does, right?
Nobody does.
Yeah. No, we'll see what happens, Colin, but I appreciate your call, my friend. Thank you very much. 702-221-7283. So we're going to be taking calls for about another 10 to 15 minutes, and then I'll be saying goodbye because I have to do 2 podcasts back-to-back. I'm doing Don Lemon's show coming up at the top of the hour, and then JoJo from Jers, I'm doing her podcast. She's great. So going to break a few minutes earlier today, but we're going to take some more phone calls. Let's go to Gary. Gary is next up on PTL. Hey, Gary, what's going on?
Hey, Brian, how are you?
Good.
Love the show.
Thank you.
Listen to you every day. Hard
Thank
to
you.
get on, but I keep trying. It's something that's been on my mind, and I want to say I'm glad you got a guy coming in tomorrow to talk about this election, because I feel also it was rigged. It's not a fair election. A fair election would be like if they're in South Dakota, North Dakota.
Yeah.
Okay. But when you went to the battleground states, okay, you got mailboxes being put on fire.
Yeah.
You got long lines, people standing on lines 3 and 4 hours to vote. You got bomb threats coming in.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Can I just ask
Brian,
you?
Can I just finish, Brian?
Okay, go ahead, and then I want to respond to what you just said. Go ahead.
Okay. So you got all this distraction You got the Republicans, as they always do. As far as I'm concerned, they're the cheaters in here. The gerrymander and everything else to win. When you look at Jim Jordan's area up in Ohio, his area is like an S. Why?
Yeah.
So you got all of this disturbance where people can't go in and vote fairly. How can anyone call that a fair election? They didn't do none of that in North Dakota and South Dakota.
Okay, let me respond to that. So this is just my opinion. If somebody, you can say that you don't believe that things were done fairly. I think that's one thing to say. To say, gosh, I don't think. Okay, yeah, I understand. I think that's one thing to say, but I think it's another thing to say the election was stolen. Now, I'm not ready to say that unless somebody can provide me overwhelming, widespread voter fraud evidence, and that's why I'm having this gentleman join us on the show tomorrow, and I'm going to allow him to make the case. But we have to be careful, my friend. I'm not saying what you're talking about is not valid. I'm not trying to discredit you. All I'm saying is I want to see actual, real, widespread voter fraud evidence before I can ever make the claim. Why? Because I don't want to be like them. I don't want to be like people back in 2020 with no evidence of widespread voter fraud that still say the election was stolen because we don't like the result. Does that make sense?
Can I ask you a question?
Sure. You can ask me anything you want. Go ahead.
I understand what you're saying.
Yep.
In those battleground states, those issues that I mentioned to you, would you consider that fair?
Well, here's what I will say to that. According to those battleground states and all the votes that were tallied, we're talking about around 200,000 votes that could have changed this election based on the Electoral College. I said at the beginning that this was going to be a very tight race. Now, I did pick Kamala Harris. I thought she would edge him out and win. I was wrong on that, but never did I say this was going to be a landslide. Now, if you listen to MAGA Republicans, they'll lead you to believe that this is a mandate. This is not a mandate. It really came down to 200,000 votes when you actually talk about those battleground states. Now, he barely won the popular vote. That still surprises me. Barely. When I say barely, I mean 1.7% he won the popular vote by all the votes that are tallied, the last numbers that I saw. So we're talking about a very close election. Now, I don't like the fact that there were bomb threats. I don't like the fact that there were some issues, but I'm not ready to say that the election was rigged or that they cheated or that, I'm just not ready to go there. However, I want you to do me a favor. I want you to listen to the interview tomorrow. And I'm very interested in what this guy has to say. From what I can see, he's a very smart guy. I've seen his videos. He knows what he's talking about. If he could actually show evidence, then my next step will be you need to take it to court. And why hasn't the Kamala Harris campaign done that? But we'll talk about that tomorrow, my friend. And I want you to listen and I want you to call in and tell me what you think. Thank you for the call, sir. 702-221-7283 is the number to call. Let's go to Lou. Lou is next up on PTL. What's going on, Lou?
Hello, Brian. How you doing today?
Good. What's on your mind today, Lou?
Cool. Yeah, this might be switching gears a little bit, but did you hear about Trump wanting to have court-martial hearings once he takes office?
I did not hear that. No, I did not.
I heard that he wants to have the hearings concerning the Afghanistan withdrawal. And if that's the case, and if Biden has intelligence on that, Biden, in my opinion, should pardon all high-ranking officers that were involved.
Well, I mean, listen, I wouldn't have a problem with that. I also think Joe Biden should pardon his son. We know Donald Trump would do that. When you look at all the scumbags that Donald Trump has given pardons to, and I don't think Hunter Biden is a scumbag, by the way. I think he's a man who at times took advantage of who his father was, didn't break any laws there, but he did break some laws. He's somebody that had a very bad drug problem, which sadly a lot of people in this country have. I feel for him, but he seems like actually not a horrible guy. He's made some mistakes. Yes, we know that he's done a lot of cocaine and probably paid some women to have sex with them. But then again, Hunter Biden's not running for the AG position, right? The Republicans want to bash Hunter Biden, who never was in public office, who was Joe Biden's son, and they want to bash him for having a drug problem. Look at Matt Gaetz. And this was the guy who they were defending. They were defending him. They're still defending him. They don't want the report to come out. They call people like me a pedophile. If you're anti-Donald Trump, you're a pedophile. Yet they support pedophiles and they defend them. Matt Gaetz is a perfect example of that.
Definitely regarding Gaetz, statute of limitations hasn't been passed on that yet. But even if DOJ right now wanted to try to prosecute, it would be squashed by Trump.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So, these are, unfortunately, I use the term accountability, and there's no accountability for Donald Trump. There's no accountability for his lackeys. 702-221-7283 is the number to call if you want to be a part of the program. By the way, this is kind of a weird, I don't know what, make of this what you want, but we have breaking news. According to a pool report, we don't know who's involved, but 2 ambulances were just seen leaving Mar-a-Lago. I don't know what that means. I don't know who it's involving. Take that for what you want. If we get any more information on that, I will share that with you. We know that 2 ambulances have left Mar-a-Lago. 702-221-7283, the number to call. Let's go to Kim. Kim is next. What's up, Kim?
Hi. I want to say one thing about your guest today. I definitely do believe he was definitely speaking MAGA talking points, MAGA vision, MAGA verse. That's without question.
Yeah.
And while I appreciate you having guests on that you want to try to have a conversation with, I think you can see in chat a lot of people would like to see more pushback. So that's just on that.
Well, here's the thing, right? Here's the thing. Let's start with gun control. We could have had that conversation for an hour and a half.
Exactly. I get it.
I was only supposed to have him on for 20 to 25 minutes. We had a 45-minute conversation. We touched on a number of different issues. I disagreed with him on the transgender issue. I told him why. I disagreed with him on gun control stuff. I told him why. I disagreed with him on Donald Trump, even anybody that would support him. I gave him all the reasons why, and I let him state his case. And, that's really all I can do. All I can tell you is that if somebody's going to be respectful to me, I'm going to be respectful to them. And I'm not, and I feel like that's the way I conducted that interview. And at the same time, I didn't agree with most of what he said.
Now, on deportations,
yes.
Can't even say the damn word. The one question I have been posing all over social media is Donald Trump and his stooges, they're, in my opinion and my knowledge with HR, I got 25 years as an HR exec, and I work with a lot of attorneys. I do not see how the country of Mexico is going to be forced to take any. Where is it in any written book that says you can send 5,000 immigrants and we'll gladly accept them?
Yeah.
So I don't even think that's even going to work. I don't care if it's in Arizona. I don't care if it's in El Paso, Eagle Pass. It's not going to happen. Mexico, and she's a female, I don't see her saying, sure, Mr. Trump,
yeah,
I'll let you bring in all these people from Honduras.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what do you think about that? I mean, I think that we need to speak more about that. Where does Donald Trump, where is it says, written in stone, that is exactly what Mexico must do?
I think clearly what Mexico doesn't want is a border wall. I think clearly what Mexico doesn't want is Donald Trump reelected, which is what took place. There's a lot of things that Mexico does not want, but I will say this. I will criticize Mexico, first of all, starting with the cartels. I don't think Mexico cares about the border. I do think there's a lot of good, hardworking people in Mexico that want a better life for themselves, and that's why they want to come to this country. So I will say that, my dear. But I have to, again, share some breaking news with you. Again, this is happening as we are on the air. And as I just read, and I'm having trouble reading it, but as I just read, and I will repeat this, and we have a little bit more information on what's been taking place right now at Mar-a-Lago. And I'm only going by reports on, this one is from The Independent. At Mar-a-Lago right now, there are 20 to 25 cars, 2 ambulances, and a helicopter hovering above the residents before the vans and ambulances left. That is according to The Independent. Again, I don't know what that means. I'm not trying to insinuate something. I don't know who it involves. But I think it's fair to say, if that is true, which I believe it is, a report from The Independent, 20 to 25 cars, 2 ambulances, and a helicopter leads me to believe that there was a medical episode with somebody there of significance. Don't know who it is. I'm speculating at this point, but we're talking about 20 to 25 vehicles over there, and I'm looking at images and pictures, so I don't know what's going on here, but per a transition source and the Secret Service. The ambulances were part of the Vice President-elect J.D. Vance's motorcade. So I don't know what exactly that means. This is the problem with social media. You don't really know what's going on. And now I have another report that says false alarm. Ambulances at Mar-a-Lago are part of a J.D. Vance motorcade. So again, we have a ton of reports out there. Some might be true. Some might not be true. We're hearing conflicting reports with ambulances and 25 cars leaving Mar-a-Lago. Some reports are saying this was part of J.D. Vance's motorcade, and other reports are not saying that. So again, this will probably all be cleared up. I would imagine if it was somebody of significance, we probably would have found out about it by now. But there are a lot of reports saying that this was now a part of J.D. Vance's motorcade. So we will continue to monitor this situation. So unfortunately, I got to roll, folks. We got to end the show, cut the show a little bit short today because I have a couple podcast shows that I was invited to be a guest on that I need to do. So we are going to have this guy on the show tomorrow, who one of my callers just mentioned, who is claiming that the 2024 election was stolen. He's a guy, a part of cybersecurities. He has a wealth of experience. I'm going to let him make his case tomorrow to start the show. And then I'll let you guys decide, what I always do on this show. Unfortunately, we got to roll, and I got to end the show early today. And I can't get to all the calls. And unfortunately, I think former NBA veteran Paul McKeskey is waiting on hold. Sorry, Mo. I got to get to you tomorrow, my friend. We'll talk tomorrow. But anyway, thanks for joining us, everybody. Appreciate you listening. Subscribe to my YouTube page at PTL Radio Show, and we will see you tomorrow. Same time, same place. Have a great day, everybody.